Howdy, friends. Welcome to our first ever Classic Azeroth Deep Dive. We're going to be starting off with none other than the Druid, and I was fortunate enough to have Taladril here with us today. How you doing, Taladril?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem, no problem. Now, for anyone who has played a Druid and done any research on them, Taladril probably needs no introduction, but for those that haven't, just a little bit about him. Frankly, an expert on all things Druid. He's a theory crafter. Is that a fair way to describe yourself, Taladril? Or for
Sure.
me
At
to
least a
describe you?
light theory crafter. Sure.
Well, if you're not if you're not an expert, who is? So I like it. Um, so one of the reasons I wanted to have this interview with you and why I wanted to start off with the Druid is a lot of people who might know our channel would know that I had been talking about doing a shaman up to this point, a restoration shaman, and I've only just recently made a decision to switch to a restoration druid. And in doing that, I've just gotten almost obsessive over trying to learn as much as I can about the druid and looking into the class, looking up guides, and posting on forums. And what I've found is a lot of, I guess, misconceptions out there and a lot of conflicting information. And a lot of people have a lot of different ideas of what druids can and can't do. A lot of people see them as a little underperforming. Some people think they're the best class in the game. And I wanted to really kind of get an expert and hopefully maybe we could be another voice out there to just say, hey, here's a little bit more about druids and clean up some of that misinformation. So I'd like to go ahead and get into that. But before I do, I want to ask, what is your experience with druids? Like, what got you into them and
So
all that?
I started playing a druid in Kata, and just thought it was a really cool spec and how you could do a little bit of everything. And I mean, obviously in Kata you have the dual talent capability, so you could easily change from healing to tanking and whatnot
Mm-hmm.
in that sense. But I was like, wow, this is a really neat that you can, this shape shifting gives you all of these abilities and gives you that flexibility for playstyle. So if you feel like you want to tank or DPS or heal, it just is one shape shift form away. So I was getting into private servers a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
and knew at that time, I was like, well, let's try Druid out because it seems pretty cool. And I knew that I hadn't really given them a fair shake back in original vanilla, so I thought, let me try it with private servers. So I leveled up a Druid 1 to 60 on the Rebirth, and then after that, I again leveled Druid 1 to 60 on Nostalrius
Okay,
and
so
took
you've
it
got quite an
all
extensive
the way.
experience with
Yeah.
leveling them.
Yeah, and then doing the full rating as Druid. And I started out with a pretty hardcore guild. We were
Mm-hmm.
top 10 for sure
Oh,
in
nice.
Nostalrius's time. And we and I during the early times, MC and early Blackwing Lair, I was doing Resto, and I was actually doing Height of the Wild Spec, or Heart of the Wild Spec, Dirk,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, for all of that. And then after Blackwing Lair, or sort of like deep into Blackwing Lair, I convinced them to let me try a little bit of feral stuff because I was gathering gear and just thought that that would be a really interesting thing to explore.
This
And
this was during Nostalrius.
yes, and then at the end of Nostalrius, when it shut down and then changed over to Elysium and then to Anathema eventually on Light's Hope, continued to do Feral full time,
Mm-hmm.
and then taking it through progression for AQ and Nex.
I'm curious how that was received then. How, cause you brought up, hey, I'd like to do feral druid, bring it into these raids for, you say, a progressive hardcore guild. There's a lot of I understand people out there that see druids as an underperforming class, and whether that's true or not, how were you able to convince them? Did it take a lot of like arm twisting, or were they like, yeah, let's try it out, let's do it?
Thankfully, they were pretty open-minded in general. I think there was a little bit of like just sort of eye rolling, but it was just like, it was definitely like not, hey, I want to do this full time, but it was like, hey, let's try this out and see what happens. And we tried it, and it was like, this is pretty serviceable. It wasn't like I was getting, one shot, and I was having pretty much equal levels of challenges, and there were also some slight benefits that were sort of nice to tap into once in a while, plus the flexibility. So it was like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we're low on healers or this or that or whatever. Can you do that? And it's like, yeah, sure. I had the gear for whatever, so it didn't really matter. And being able to do those roles was really convenient. So it seemed like a real boon at that point. And then, being one of the few active ferals actually doing stuff got me a bit of a name on that server. And so by the time we got the relaunch going, I found a guild that was really interested in having a full-time feral role, and continue to find guilds. So they might not have been as hardcore, but that's never really been my style anyway, so it wasn't a big deal, but still hardcore enough to get the content done.
Now, oh, that's awesome. And I want to ask then, were you on the PvE or PvP server for Nostarius?
Oh, the PvP, because that's the one that came out originally. So the
Yeah.
PvE server was pretty late. So I mean, it was a good server, had a lot of people on it, but yeah,
Yeah, it was
I
very
mean,
populated.
yeah, definitely. But the
But you had
PvP
already
one
started, it
was
sounds like.
first. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our guild we actually did beta testing for Nostalrius.
Oh,
So
cool. Okay,
we
you were there
were
from the
day one
beginning.
Nostalrius. Oh yeah, definitely. So it was pretty cool to get going on that.
Well, the reason I ask is because I was on Nostarius up until the shutdown. I was a Horde
Hmm.
shaman, and
Okay.
I'm curious how often we could have passed each other. Like, I don't remember the name Taladril, but it would have been funny if we had crossed path and not even known it. Because you were obviously,
Yeah.
on my microphone, you were obviously Horde. I'm sorry, Alliance, and I was obviously Horde, and so it would have been
Hmm.
fun. You might have ganked me.
No, I probably didn't gank you, but but we might have met in Battlegrounds a bit. I always got a lot of weird looks when people were like, "Well, what rank are you shooting for?" And I'm like, "Exalted,"
Oh, the
because
reputation.
because I just wanted the reputation. And once I was done the reputation, and pretty much rank 8, but like rank 8 takes no thought at all. So it was just like, okay, I got my rank 8, I'm out of here, guys.
That's
So
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah,
yeah, it was different.
I'm seeing a little bit of that. Like, I'll talk to people that played Nostalrius. I'm like, I don't know. I could have been in a group with this guy and not even known that who he was or anything. So it's kind of cool. But hey, I wanted to
Yeah.
go back to something you had brought up, and something that so I had mentioned that I had shifted from a shaman into a druid. I wanted to play a shaman originally. I wanted to actually do restoration because I love healing. I mean, I think specifically classic WoW healing is one of the most exciting uh, healing. Like, I think it's the best time to heal. I do heal sometimes in retail WoW, and I find it very different, not as enjoyable as classic. Because I feel like classic, you're constantly trying to manage your resources, and it's a little bit more fun to me to kind of feel like I'm maximizing my efficiency with mana. It's something I always strive for. But
Yeah.
one of the reasons I wanted to do a druid instead of a shaman is, in my experience, and this might be different for other people, but restoration shamans, as amazing as they are, if you go deep restoration, you lose almost all like PvP potential and world farming potential. Like, if you need
Hmm.
to farm mats and everything, and they can. So a shaman, if they go hybrid, I mean, they can deal a lot of damage. They're very useful as a hybrid, excuse me, but they lose a lot of healing potential. And I wanted that mana tide totem. You can't have that and be an effective hybrid. And so I was like, well, I'm going to be in a bit of a rough situation. I've played this restoration shaman before. I knew the problems I ran into. I don't want to be constantly switching specs. And so I was like, well, let me look into a druid. Even if I go full restoration, I can at least switch to bear form and do some farming where I'm not so dependent on mana. And I looked up some stuff and I found this. You had mentioned the Heart of the Wild spec, and I was looking at this, and I'm going to show it here on the screen for any of our viewers. They can kind of see the build. But at first glance, I'm like, wait a second, that's a feral spec. That's not, no, no, no. And I had like done some research, which I'm sure you know this. But as you go down the feral tree, there's that key thing called Heart of the Wild, which gives you 20% additional intellect, and then the rest of the points go into the restoration tree to get more efficient and quicker healing touch, so that your druid is got a big mana pool to do some efficient heals. And I was looking at this, I'm like, this is fantastic. So I actually sent you a spec. I was like, hey, is this a real thing? And you're like, yeah, just change up these things, and but you got it. That's it. And so I was like, well, this is perfect because it can farm materials. You can PvP with it. You can tank with it. You can heal with it. I don't think you can really DPS, but you can do so much stuff with this spec. I'm like, well, this is it. This almost seems too good to be true.
Yeah, Heart of the Wild spec is amazing. It's really cool. It's that quintessential jack of all trades, master of none, but it's like it gets you 90% of the way there with both feral tanking and healing, which is it's amazing. It's so cool that that kind of spec is in a vanilla environment. Uh, the real key for Druid healing is, as long as you have the improved healing touch and the nature's swiftness, that pretty much gets you everything you need. Like, and also I guess reflection too, but like these
Hmm.
other deeper resto talents that sound good on paper aren't that great. Like improved rejuvenation, like you don't really cast rejuvenation in raids too much. Gift of
Mm-hmm.
Nature sounds really good, except you don't realize from the tooltip, it's only increases the base healing spell. So any plus healing, it doesn't affect. So it's actually mathematically like only half as useful as it looks. So it really only increases stuff by 5%. So it's like,
That's the one that increases heals by 10%, or so
yeah,
it says
yeah.
is 10%.
Right, 10%. It's more like 5% because of it. So it's
Mm,
like that's not that great, you know. And then you got Tranquil Spirit, which reduces mana cost, but then that gets offset by the Heart of the Wild. So it's like really you're only losing a little bit of, plus to every heal with Gift of Nature and Swift Mend, but
mm-hmm.
even other specs don't use Swift Mend. It's not really that amazing of a talent, and everything else is pretty much identical. So yeah, it's not a bad spec at all in that sense. You can do entirely serviceable healing
That's
with Heart of
fantastic.
the Wild.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And for those who might not know it, Heart of the Wild is a spec. I had gone to mention this a little bit, but it's as some have explained, the best 5-point talent in the game. It gives you 20% additional mana when you're from your gear. So your gear gives you increases the amount of intellect. I'm sorry, I said mana. Uh,
Yeah, not just mana, but crit too.
yeah, crit as well. So you get 20% additional intellect. When you're in bear form, 20% additional stamina, and when you're in cat form, 20% additional strength. And in classic, feral druids benefit a lot from strength, even in cat form, and so it allows you to just get so much more from your gear. And so yeah, it's a like really the jack of all trades spec that I've heard many druids say they get this and they never respec. Like they just use this
Yeah.
for everything. And I actually have been testing it out on just kind of a test server, just in PvP and a little like some basic PvE. And I'm like, hey, this spec does it all. Like anytime I have like a failure, I'm like, well, that's probably my gear, me, or something. But it was definitely not the spec that caused me to underperform in this area. So yeah, I think it's such a fantastic spec, and really, upon finding out this is one of the reasons I was like, all right, I want to play a Restoration Druid.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few losses that really hit you hard from a cat perspective. So it
Mm-hmm.
works, but you can't really do DPS, especially in raids as cat, because you're cut off at the knees really, because you need that Omen of Clarity, you
Mm-hmm.
need natural weapons, and I think you sort of have to lose a few cat points with like the shred ability, that kind of thing. Um, but I mean, you can literally get every single survival talent as a bear. So even if you're
Yeah.
just doing some light off-specking as a raid tank, like as long as you're doing like trash pulls or something like that, it's not like you're in any way less strong than a full feral bear. So it's pretty interesting. As long as you've got the gear, it sort of takes care of itself. Now, there is one major adjustment that people can decide, especially if they're on a PvP server, is sometimes they'll throw 1 point less into Heart of the Wild, so they only get 4 out of 5, and then they pick 1 point and put it into Nature's Grasp, which is a really nice talent to have for especially open world PvP.
Yeah. Yeah. I have seen people do that, but I'm like, man, I don't want to miss out on that 4% on all those stats.
I know,
And so
yeah,
I can see the
it's
argument for it. But
yeah.
as a Tauren, I mean, you probably played Night Elf as Tauren. I'm kind of hoping War Stomp will make up for that ability. I mean,
Mm.
it's not a full, like, it's not absolutely equal to it, but maybe I can, like, use War Stomp, then get a root off, or something like that to get more utility. But I tell you, I want that 4%.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it hurts to not have it full out like that. But you definitely want to choose Nature Swiftness over Leader of the Pack. The Nature Swiftness is
Oh,
huge,
yeah.
and it also really helps for the solo farming of stuff too, because then you can take on a much larger elite bosses, that kind of thing. Because being able to just quickly shift out, do a quick NS to a major heal, and then go right back into form it's massive for
Yeah,
that kind
full
of thing.
blast healing touch will typically put you at full
It
health. You know.
practically, yeah, it's practically full health. Exactly. Yeah, it's just big time.
Well, something else I wanted to mention is, or go back over, is you talked about some of your progress in Classic, but it sounds like you got up to Naxxramas. You were rating Naxxramas consistently as a druid.
Yep.
How far into? I mean, you were tanking through that.
Yep. Yeah, I tanked all of it.
You tanked all of Naxxramas as a druid.
Yep. Hmm.
Well, that should
Yeah, we
clear up.
went all the way up to KT. Yeah, I tanked four horsemen multiple times. The
Really? Now,
front two and back two. Back two is better, but Druid can do it all. Absolutely.
See, that should
Um,
clear up the misconception out there that druids are. There's still people out there, and I've found this. They think bear tank is a meme spec. It's just a joke. And you gotta be. And
yeah,
I hear this like if some people have progressed through Nax like consistently, not one time because the tank didn't show up, then I feel like that should kind of clear up that misconception that no, bear tanks are real. They can do it.
it's totally doable. I mean, the especially with the numbers that we've seen with beta, with what we expect bosses to have for their values, it doesn't seem like bears will have any problem there. And what they bring is great. You know, they have excellent fairy fire uptime
Mm-hmm.
because they can just cast it instantly. You don't have to take a healer to take one GCD out of the way, and bears actually have a real sense of potentially being optimal for certain bosses. Bears are probably the best tanks for Thaddeus because of their
Mm-hmm.
threat generation. They are excellent soakers for Patchwork's Hateful Strikes, and they're also potentially excellent main tanks for Patchwork, no less, because warriors have a real hard time getting a lot of threat with main tanking Patchwork. He doesn't really hit very hard with his main hits. It's the Hatefuls that take the big hits, and so then people get really threat capped on that one
Mm-hmm.
because of that. So Druids don't need as much rage to be able to dish out the threat. So yeah, there's a lot of advantage. And then you have like Saffron, where a feral can still do pretty decent healing with a good healing set, even if you're full feral.
Mm-hmm.
And Saffron is all about healing. Like there's so much need for healing there. So every single extra healer you can have for that fight is huge. So to be able to have your feral tank go and do full healing on that, like that's way better than a warrior just going and doing DPS. Way better. So it's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then, so would you say a feral druid, like a bear tank, you wouldn't say it's second to a warrior or just short of a warrior, but a tank with a different focus? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that is the way I see it. Is to me, the Druid Feral tank is an optimal third tank spot. So whoever the third tank is, you should make it the Feral, and you should have a Feral. Every guild should have one Feral to do it. The other main thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that Ferals, their gear set is extremely different than everybody else. And so when you're gearing up a raid, you don't get a lot of raid pieces as you go from each boss.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah, if
feral is
feral
taking all this
drops,
gear.
yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
it's
If stuff
like
drops, who's it
give
going
it
to
to
go
the
to?
feral, and they're like, great. Rather than trying to gear up a whole extra warrior to do a tanking role, you can gear up somebody who's taking all this garbage loot and making something amazing out of it, and it helps gear your raid up faster. So it's a real nice plus.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's. I mean, you've got me convinced. You've got me sitting here wondering, like, would I make a better tank or a healer? I don't know what I want to do. So good thing I've got plenty of time while I level to decide.
Yeah, well, it's nice because it's first off, it's easy to get loot as a druid just in general
Mm-hmm.
because there's very few druids that go to raids. Usually, they only need two or three. So any set pieces you pretty much just absorb automatically. And again, the feral pieces nobody wants them either, so you absorb those as well. So it's sort of like by default, passively, you'll be able to get the gear you need. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as people sort of know that your trajectory is whatever it might be, then they can sort of nudge it your way. And yeah, I mean, if you decide halfway through the game, it's like, let's try the tanking out, you'd be able to do it.
You've got the class for it. Yeah, yeah, I like that. I had actually talked to I've got a guild that's already set up, and we're kind of getting everything ready for once the game launches. But something and their mentality they try to have, or their goal, is to bring kind of one of everything, or at least one of every class that can take gear, because they don't want gear to drop and just go, oh, this is useless. I mean, other than like paladin gear
Sure.
for horde and shaman gear for alliance, if something drops, they want someone there. So we have a balanced druid. I don't think we have a feral DPS, but we've got a little one of everything just in case. Hey, some leather gear drops. It's really good for casters, but no warlock can get it. So I actually wanted to kind of bring this into DPS, not counting the Heart of the Wild spec or anything. What about feral DPS? Do you think that ferals, like, how valuable do you think that is in PVE?
They can be very competitive, but there's two caveats to that. One is it's the most challenging rotation in vanilla to do it right. And
Is
it
that
takes a
referring to
lot
power
of,
shifting?
yes,
Ah,
yes.
okay.
So So to do that right takes a lot of skill and practice and understanding, and also a lot of consumables.
Hmm.
And so that's the second part, is you have to go full tilt on consumables, including like mana potions and even like flasks of wisdom of all things, so like just to get yourself more mana. And then the real pain is, to really be competitive, you need to use manual crowd pummelers, and that
Okay.
requires just farming Nomergon like crazy. Tanks don't have to do it very much because you might only use a few charges in an entire raid, so you'd only need 2, 3, 4, something like that. But DPS, the bottom line is, every time you've got a manual crowd pummeler equipped, it's giving you the best DPS you can. So the more
Yeah.
you use it, the more DPS you do. The less you use it, the less you use. So it's all up to you for how many you're willing to farm for that, and that can be a challenge, because to do it right can require even up to 15 per raid week, and it's like, yikes, that's a lot of Nomergon time.
Well, I have to claim a little bit of ignorance on. I'm not much of a DPSer on really retail or classic. I seem to bring a different mentality, which is why I think I'm a little bit better at healing and tanking. So I'm claiming ignorance on DPS, but I know about the crowd pummelers and where to get them and everything.
Hmm.
Just to explain that a little bit to any viewers we have right now, the crowd pummeler is an item that drops from Nomergon. It's a low level mace, and it has an ability with 3 charges, which increases attack speed by 30% for, isn't it 30? I'm sorry, 50%.
50%,
Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
for 30 seconds.
30 seconds. And
Yep.
you can farm it solo from Nomergon, which obviously makes it much easier for Alliance to get. But what Druids will do is they'll keep these in their inventory, and because a Druid is not using a weapon for anything other than stats, they can equip that without much penalty, and 30 or 50% attack speed is much better than any item you're going to, any weapon you're going to have that gives better stats. And so Druids will keep a bunch of these in their bags as much as they can, and just use them during fights and get that extra bit of DPS. But something I'm claiming ignorance on is I don't actually know a lot about power shifting. I know the idea of it, but would you be willing to explain a little bit about what that is and why it's necessary?
Yeah, definitely. So it's really just leveraging a certain combination of things. So one of them is talents. So
Mm-hmm.
a cat who's doing DPS has the fur talent, which is actually in the resto tree, which if you shift into cat, it gives you 40 energy by shifting. So that automatically gives you 40 energy when you're into cat. Then you combine that with the wolf's head helm,
Mm-hmm.
and that helm
I'm going to link
also
that on
gives you
screen so everyone
energy.
can see what it does.
So you can see that it gives 20 energy when you do. So when you combine those two together, every time you shift into cat, you instantly have 60 energy. And
Okay.
so then with that, you can then combine it with a shred, which is effectively like a rogue backstab. And so with that all set up, you can shift into cat, do a shred, and then you can shift out of cat and shift into cat and do another shred. And it can be very quick, rather than having to wait for your energy to regain automatically. And the more mana you have, the
Okay.
more times you can do it. And so then another critical cat talent is also natural shapeshifter, to reduce mana cost of shapeshifting, so you can do
Yeah,
more
they
of
get
them.
you like 30%, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, 30%. Yep.
Okay, that's incredible. See,
So
that's like clever
so
though
the
that druids are using
yeah,
this
it is.
method in order to keep up with
It's
DPS.
it's simple, but it's all. And then of course you have to combine that with proper amounts of combo points to use, so that you can then use your Furious Bite and that kind of stuff. So and the tricky part about that one is that Ferocious Bite,
Mm-hmm.
it zeroes your energy out, because it's one of those few that converts energy into damage. So you don't want
Oh,
to do
that's right.
Ferocious Bite at certain energy levels, because you're wasting energy on not much damage gain. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of those other tricky parts. So there's a lot of like
Sounds like a
if
very
when
complicated
gotchas.
rotation.
It is very complicated. You really need to practice it, and it's all sort of based on current situation and combo point numbers, and boss situation and all that.
I mean, I feel
So
like my,
yeah,
my hands would be pretty
tricky.
tired from, or my fingers would just
Yeah,
be sore from just click, 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 trying to get that going. Hey guys, I
yeah.
need a
I've
water break. I can't keep
I've
raiding.
tried it a bit. It is hard. I'm not good at it, but
Mm,
I'm not really like, I do DPS once in a while, but I enjoy the tanking healing more too. So
yeah.
that's my focus.
I've anytime I DPS, just I don't know why. My gear is the same. I've looked up rotations. I've done all the research I can. I'm like 20-30% beneath everybody else. I'm like, I don't know
Yeah,
what it is. I consider myself decent at PvP. I love to heal, but when I'm in raids, I think I'm watching everybody else instead of my target. So I'm like, I don't think I've got the
right.
mindset for DPS.
Yeah, I don't either. It's just to me, it's just don't care that much. It's too focused on the self and not focused on what you can bring to the raid, you know. So
Yeah,
that's I like that more.
that's a way to look at it. I think if I did do a DPS and is difficult as this would be, is I like the balanced druid rotation. You just
Mm.
do is it a starfire? Just starfire,
Starfire, Starfire,
starfire,
Starfire.
starfire. Nothing else. I think that is a rotation I might could handle.
Yeah, you can handle that.
But
Definitely.
yeah, well, I want to actually talk a little about balance. Is it's often referred to as a mean spec for DPS, um, and I'm just curious what your thoughts on that. If a balanced druid wanted to be competitive, how do you think they'd have to go about that? I asked because we have a balanced druid in our guild, and I actually messaged him. I'm like, listen, man, I want you to do well. I want to see this. If you need help farming materials, you message me. We're gonna see you do well.
Yeah. I mean, the balance is another one of those where it's required for you to go full tilt to even be competitive.
Hmm.
But you can be competitive. You're never going to be optimal. Like a mage or a warlock will always outclass you. Um, but you can get close. So it's not like it's the worst thing ever.
Hmm.
The problem, of course, is Moonkin do have some issues with mana. As
Yeah.
long as they feed themselves with their own innervates, and you know, if others feed them innervates too, if they want to be nice, then that helps them out a lot. They aren't as as people act like they are. Like they can pretty much get
Okay.
through any boss fight, any average boss fight. You can go like 3, 4, something like that minutes full tilt without any downranking as a Moonkin. And
Oh,
it's like
really?
for
No
any boss
downranking.
fight, yeah, yeah, for any boss fight, that's like that's fine. You know, that's plenty. You know, so who cares? Um, but I mean, it's not nearly as bad as how people act for hybrid specs. Like honestly, Moonkin is probably better than Shadow Priest and definitely better than like Elemental Enhancement Shaman, any of that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. So Moonkin's it gets a really bad rap, but
They
it's not as bad as some of the others.
Yeah, they also bring something to the raid that I don't think you're getting from anyone else. Like or what from a lot of the other hybrid classes. Like take for example, a balanced druid is giving spell crit. So if you put him in a group with
Yeah.
mages and warlocks, you're gonna get a lot more out of him. But like an elemental shaman, as much as I love elemental shamans, they don't really bring anything additional to the raid. So I think
Right.
I could see it argued more for a balanced druid. But a question kind of going back to the feral DPS though, even if they were farming though, those crowd pummelers and doing the power shifting, how do they do for DPS? Do they keep up with everyone else, or even with all that work, are they still a little behind?
They we don't have a lot of data points to show for the people who are truly skilled at it, but
Hmm.
for those that are, they are equally competitive. Like they can put out rogue and warrior numbers, which is sort of nuts.
That's
And
awesome.
they're actually going to probably do even better in classic. It's going to be hard to say because there's a lot of ups and a lot of downs because we found some stuff that are buffs, some stuff that are nerfed, but the
Hmm.
fact that
That's true.
there's lower armor on bosses, it seems, on classic, that will be a big buff to druids because druids get really hit hard with the armor nerf because of that. So yeah, they should be good. They should be good, but it does take a really skilled person going full tilt to make that happen.
Well, I'm hoping, like, I'm rooting for the Druids because a little, there's kind of a part of me is I always root for the underdogs. Like,
Yeah,
I want to believe Elemental Shamans can play a place in a raid, but I don't think they can. But I do think Enhancement could maybe have a spot, and I do think Balanced Druids can. I've seen people work on the rotations and do it, but they have to just chug mana potions. It's doable though. I hope. So
yeah,
I'm kind of excited to see Classic out though because we'll get to see people bring more into it and test it out and be like, hey, maybe this druid is 2%, 5% behind the mages, but like he can innervate, he can battle res, he's got armor. You know, there's some utility they have other than just the meters.
definitely, definitely. Yeah, that I mean, there's a lot of utility, and I to me, I think the answers are in for feral tanking that we are going to see a lot more of those in classic,
Yeah.
and I very much hope that that's just going to flat out just go away. That people are going to stop complaining about ferals being bad tanks because they just aren't. they're
Yeah, that
totally
seems to
fine.
be.
Bring a ton to the raid for utility, just a ton. So it's really nice.
Yeah, again, seeing feral druid tanks progress through Nax really kind of. I mean, and someone says, "Well, you can't tank molten core because blah blah
Yep.
blah blah." Like, I'm
Please.
sorry, I don't think that's justified.
No, it's not.
Well, the one role that druids don't seem to get a bad rep on is restoration, and that's kind of why I'm kind of
Mhm.
excited to do like a
Well,
restoration
they
druid.
do actually. People will still crap on them a little bit too.
I've
There's
seen
like
that, but it seems to be most people seem okay.
it.
It's their
The
most
thing
preferred
is,
role, at least I should say that.
yeah, they're still gonna bring you to a raid. Like that's the issue. Is it's like, is anybody gonna be like, oh, the druids at the bottom of the meters, so stop bringing the two druids that are in the raid. Like, no, you're still gonna bring the two druids that are in the
Meanwhile,
raid.
they're
So it doesn't.
innervating the priest and not themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like whatever, you know. But no, I mean, I think people utilize druids incorrectly too, and I've seen really good resto druids put out really good numbers, but it takes a smarter healer to really make them shine because the heals are slow, but they are also very efficient. So like druids just they can dish out a lot of HPS with equal amounts compared to other classes. The issue is it's just that they're slow. So a druid
Yeah,
needs
they're
to
not
be a
getting those
lot more
snipe
of a
hills.
no, they have to be a more predictive healer, and they have to be assigned to like I think druids should be assigned to tanks. Like they have so many good tank tools. Like they've got nature's swiftness, and they also have the really efficient um, just standard healing touch, and they have two hots, which are really, you know, if anybody needs them, a tank will actually utilize a hot,
Yeah, that's
and
true. Because they're
that
constantly
whole
taking the
combination.
damage.
Yeah, like the thing that I to me, like at least from an alliance standpoint, paladins they should be on raid heals. They've got great sniping capability, and it's just a good synergy with that kind of thing. They can come back and help the tanks out with some of their blessings or whatnot. But priests and druids should be on the tanks to me, and that helps the druid out a lot to be able to boost their utility and their numbers in that sense. But most of the time, for some reason, people throw druids on the raid, and then you're doing this stupid sniping thing, and it just doesn't work so well because druids are slow, so they look bad.
Yeah, that's I see that too, but I think the argument could easily be maybe the druids. I mean, maybe the only value you can bring to a raid is not necessarily the numbers, because, like I said, innervate. I mean, if you're able to innervate yourself, somebody, whoever is getting the heals, then you might not. That won't show on the numbers, but you just increase the healing for the raid exponentially. And
Yeah,
same with like a battle res. People like to assume that, well, if you have to battle res, you made a mistake. But, like, things are going to happen. Bosses are going to crit. Things are going to happen where someone's going to die, and a druid is able to battle res. That doesn't show on the meter either. So I mean, in your opinion, what value do you think a druid is really bringing to the raid beyond healing? Is maybe those? I don't know.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have a lot of utility, and even a full resto can still do some bare off tanking if you need to. You know, for like some really, if you're stuck with a bunch of ads, like maybe Major Domo or something, and it's like, man, we got plenty of healers tonight, but we're a little low on tanks. I mean, you could tank one of those, no big deal. So it really is just it's a matter of looking at the druid as a very flexible class and playing the druid as a flexible class rather than being stuck in a very specific role. And that really will help see that value that they do bring for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd like to see a priest switch to his third tank. Let's see that happen. I'm almost
Right, right.
I'm almost a little bit bitter. I'm like, no, druids can heal. They can do it. Leave me alone. So I'm
Yeah,
interested to bring that. I want to really try to see if I can top meters though in the raid. You know, obviously for the do what helps the entire raid progress. I'm trying to help my guild out, but I want to see if they can do it. You know, they're an underdog, and I want to see
absolutely.
them rise up.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, one thing I want to ask too though is, if someone was considering a druid right now, what would you want them to know?
Uh, I mean, don't be scared of them, but they do require understanding of all of the classes to a certain extent because Bear uses warrior type mechanics with rage, Cat uses rogue type mechanics with stealth and combo points, and then obviously you've got your caster, which is both a caster DPS and a caster healer. Um, they can tank. You should definitely level as feral because it's the most efficient way to do it.
That's what I hear.
Uh, because when you're in a form, your mana can regen. So even though you're doing bear or cat kind of DPS, you are still regenerating your mana. So then when you get low on health, you pop out, you heal, and you can go right back into form. And it's like you never stopped. So there's very little downtime with Druid leveling, which is nice.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
excited to do the druid leveling process. I know I mean, you can just keep going, stop heals, and never have to really drink because you're right. You're not using mana while you're dealing your damage. So, kind
yep.
of, as someone who leveled a shaman, which is by no means the worst class to level, but they're out of mana all the time, even as
Right, right.
enhancement.
The nice thing is because of that, for sure, for the druid, it makes it very smooth. And even though you may be in feral while leveling, you can still heal dungeons. Although most
Yeah.
likely people will be asking you to tank because it's a lot easier to find healers for
Hmm.
dungeons than tanks. And that's the other thing about the Heart of the Wild spec is even if you are healing every raid, you get into dungeons, you're still going to be tanking everything because it's so easy to find healers and it's really hard to find tanks. So it's just, you can get your tanking fixed no matter what by doing it like that, even if you aren't tanking a raid. So that's nice about that. But yeah, it's just that understanding of the flexibility and that full kind of role concept. Don't pigeonhole yourself into one specific role. Learn all of the roles so that you can
Hmm.
flow from one to the other. Obviously, 1 to 60 gives you a lot of time to practice that kind of stuff, but you got to keep that mentality in mind when you're entering a raid as well. And then you'll be able to be a real asset to the raid rather than just simply a one trick pony who doesn't do that trick as well as anybody else.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you've definitely given me. I mean, the only you've given me a lot to think about. The only problem with this interview is I'm now, or I'm sorry, this discussion is I'm now like, well, do I want to tank or heal? I can't decide. But thankfully, I can switch that for later. Um,
Yeah.
well, you've given me, yeah, but you've given me a lot of awesome information. I think you're really kind of cleaning up the. I mean, a lot of the misconceptions that are out there. You've addressed a lot of them, so I really appreciate that. But before we do finish up, I do want to ask specifically what you'll be playing for Classic. Now, I'm going to assume a Druid, but what faction, class, spec, and profession are you like? What's your character? What are you looking at?
Uh, so I'm a lameo, so PvE for sure.
Wait, so you're doing
But
what is it?
PvE,
Oh, PVE. Ah, that's fine.
yeah,
You know, the older I
yeah.
get, the more I'm like, I don't know, PvP's fun, but I kind of like the older I get, the less interested PvP seems because I'm tired of being like beat by someone that plays way more than me. But I mean, I'll still be doing a PvP server, but don't ever apologize for being PvE.
No, I don't apologize, but I know that people think it's stupid.
Yeah, yeah,
But I might do an RP server. We'll see. I'm not
that's fun.
sure. Thinking about it, but yeah, um, hard to say. Definitely going to be Alliance for sure.
I guess that
So
by the portrait.
yeah, I just not. I have leveled its horde. I've even got lore master as horde, so
Oh
it's not
wow,
like I'm unknowing of them. But no, I just prefer Alliance for sure.
fair enough. I mean, I obviously prefer horde. So my favorite alliance is someone that's diehard alliance. I want them to love their faction so that it's more fun to compete against them. Those people that are
Yep,
like,
there you
I don't care. I like all the factions. It's like, fun. Root for your team, even if it's not
go.
my
Yeah,
team.
absolutely. Alliance all the way.
There you go. What about professions then? Did you? I don't know if you had mentioned that.
Oh yeah, professions. Well, don't go enchanting for leveling. I'll tell you that. That's a great way to be super poor. But
I hear
I'm
you.
probably going to go skinning and probably herbalism, and then I don't really. I'm not super fan on engineering, but we'll
Yeah, you don't get as
see.
much use out of that as a druid.
Well, no, I mean, you'll get some, but yeah, Druid doesn't need it as much. But I don't know, it's just expensive, and I just don't care that much.
Hmm.
But maybe alchemy, maybe engineering. I'm not sure, but probably keep herbalism because I think that'll be more convenient than what I had. On Nost, I was leatherworking and enchanting, which was fun. It was nice to sort of hang out and Iron
Hmm.
Forge and make money by making people stuff. But it'd be nice to be a little bit more self-sufficient with the herbing stuff.
Well,
Herbing as Druid is actually great because you can
yeah,
herb while in travel form. So it's like,
exactly.
yeah, baby, just run around, and if you throw your PvP set on then too, and you're literally running like a 60% mount. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's something else. I mean, that's something to get into later. Is the 61% speed boost
Yeah,
of a druid? I mean, yeah, you're right. That's incredible. You can pick up
yeah,
herbs without dismounting.
You're
Um,
zooming.
that's awesome. But I did want to mention you had said something that just it started turning the gears in my head. You say not to level is enchanting. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do
Don't,
herbalism in
don't,
enchanting because I want the
don't.
smoking heart of the mountain.
Well, yeah, but whatever you're gonna drop when you hit 60, then just power level enchanting up to Smoking Heart and
That's
then
what I'm going to
drop it
do.
and do
And then I'm
something
going to
else.
do alchemy.
Because, yeah, because if you're like, oh, I'll just disenchant all those greens along the way or whatever, it just is so painful. You have no money. I literally did enchanting for that reason on Nos, and I was like, man, I've never had such issues with money. I couldn't
Hmm.
believe it. It was so bad compared to what my usual was. So, yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
Just level it later. Getting to 265 is actually pretty cheap. It's the last 30 points in enchanting that really hurts because you have to use the Arcanite Rod for a lot of that stuff, and that's
Hmm.
expensive. So up until 265, you don't need Arcanite. You can get away with all the up to True Silver, I think, and so it makes it much more reasonable. You can do it, and I would bet you even under 100 gold, which is nothing for that quality of a trinket.
Yeah, it's for those who, and we're gonna close this soon, but you got me going with Smoking Heart of the Mountain. For those that don't know, is Smoking Heart of the Mountain is a trinket that can only be made by enchanters, and it doesn't require enchanting to use, but it is bind on pickup. So what your druids will often do is they'll level enchanting just to get that trinket. And the reason that trinket is so good, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it is one of two trinkets in the game that give armor. It gives 150 armor. And when you're a druid, when you switch to bear form, that 150 armor gets magnified big time. So you're able to have so much more armor from your trinkets that nobody else would normally get. And so it is actually the best in slot up until Naxxramas. Is that correct? Like always.
It depends on the role, but it is from a mitigation standpoint, it is extremely good for
Yeah,
sure.
for tanking. And it doesn't so that recipe drops to make that drops from Blackrock Depths. I've heard people say you can solo that as a druid. You can sneak in and solo that NPC that drops it. Have you ever done that before?
Yeah, Lord Rockor, I think it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's soloable as, but you really
awesome.
do need like stuff like Nature's Swiftness to help that out. If you go like Pure Feral or something like that, Pure Feral is really bad actually for
Oh, I'll
soloing
be Heart of the
mobs.
Wild. I love Heart of the
But
Wild spec all the
yeah,
way.
you need some heal talents to be able to do decent soloing of stuff. But yeah, he is soloable. He's pretty reasonable.
Okay, well you've given me some things to plan for when Classic finally launches, and
Yeah,
also a lot of great insights on druids. I'm hoping that this will clean up some misconceptions out there and just be another video people can watch if they want to learn more about druids and what to expect as them. So I really appreciate having you and for you being on this for this deep dive.
yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks everyone for watching. That's all we have right now, and I will see you guys next time.